Harumi was an ugly basement otaku who couldn't rizz up any girl, so he gets intimate with books instead. But after getting shot and reincarnating as a dog, he discovers his owner is a psycho baddie with flat melons, who writes adult fiction and uses him for inspiration. This whole mess starts with Harumi sprinting to the bookstore like a junkie desperate to get high, just so he can use his point card to buy his favorite novel. And when he finally gets back to his dump of an apartment, which smells like old pages and pure failure, the very first thing this useless nerd does is start reading. His favorite book is a novel written by an author named Akiyama Shinobu, and he can spend all day flipping through the pages. After hours of reading at home, Harumi drags himself to a bar so he can keep reading there too. As he flips through the pages, he thinks about the unreleased final volume of Akiyama Shinobu's novel titled Lust and how he can possibly get his hands on it. He even swears he won't die until he reads that final book, but the universe hears him and decides to play a fast one on him, because at that moment, a robber armed with guns suddenly starts threatening the cashier for money. When the robber catches Harumi staring at him like a total dummy, he immediately orders Harumi and the girl beside him to get up. Harumi jumps to his feet like a frightened idiot, but the strange girl next to him just keeps writing, completely ignoring the chaos happening around her. This pisses off the robber, so he walks up to the girl and threatens to blow her head off. But before he can pull the trigger, Harumi decides to play simp hero and starts fighting the armed thief. They struggle over the gun while the girl continues to write, completely unfazed by the madness. Eventually, Harumi gets overpowered by the robber, and the next thing he knows, he gets brutally shot in the head. As his soul slowly slips out of his body, the last thing he sees is the girl still writing. In the next moment, Harumi finds himself drifting in a strange, empty space on his way to the afterlife. He wonders if he's dead and starts thinking about the family he's gonna miss, and all the baddies in school he failed to clap. Reality slaps him harder than Will Smith, and he finally accepts death, until he remembers his beloved books, his favorite author, and the unreleased final volume. That's when he starts fighting death itself, refusing to go anywhere until he reads that book. To make it worse, he suddenly sees the last volume, Lust, floating right in front of him. This immediately escalates everything as Harumi stretches out his hand to grab it. The second he touches it, the book transforms into a dog, and Harumi's spirit instantly gets sucked straight into the dog's body. When Harumi opens his eyes, he finds himself in a pet shop run by some dude with a tragic afro. The hairy guy notices Harumi is awake, walks up to him, and calls him dog. The guy then offers to go get him some food, and as he goes, Harumi is confused as to why the dude called him a dog in the first place. But that's when he notices a mirror close by, and as he looks at his reflection, he almost dies a second time, realizing that he is not Harumi anymore but is now a bingo. Based on what the Afro dude explained, he said he found Harumi as a stray in the rain and brought him to the shop. Harumi cannot believe that a certified bookworm like him has been downgraded into a dog with a micro-sized pee-pee, but since he can't change his fate, he accepts it. But what he will not accept is a life with no book to read. So when he sees the Afro guy reading an OnlyFans magazine, Harumi gets thirsty to read just about anything, even if it's the user manual of an electric fan. He becomes so desperate to read that even in his sleep, he dreams of books and repeats the name of his favorite author, Akiyama Shinobu, over and over again. That's when the strange girl from the bar, the one Harumi literally died for, suddenly bursts into the pet shop like an action figure. She walks straight to the counter where Harumi's cage is and insists she wants to buy the dog. But when the Afro dude refuses, saying Harumi isn't for sale, the girl pulls out a pair of scissors she uses as a weapon and slices through the cage bars like she's cutting wrapping paper. After basically forcing the sale through brute force, the creepy girl takes Harumi away as her pet. But instead of pampering him, Harumi ends up tied up in her basement, getting tortured. While being tormented, Harumi discovers something even worse. The psycho girl can actually hear his doggy thoughts. He freaks out, but the girl tells him to shut up and stop being such a noisy pet. When Harumi finally calms down and asks how any of this is possible, the girl explains that his voice had been ringing in her head for days, so she followed the noise until it led her to the pet shop. When she asks if he's the one who kept crying in her mind and threatens to cut off his doggy rod if he lies, Harumi panics and instead asks her name. The girl introduces herself as Jaime and proudly calls herself a 10/10 baddie. But Harumi takes a closer look at her flat 2x2 chest and wonders why she would ever call herself that. She notices him staring, gets offended instantly, and pulls out her scissors weapon again to make more threats. But Harumi is already exhausted with life. First, he dies in a bar robbery, then he gets resurrected as a micro-pee-pee dog, and now he's being held hostage by a sadistic witch. As he mentally spirals, Jaime hears his thoughts about the robbery and immediately remembers he's the simp who died for her. Harumi also instantly recognizes her as the girl he died for. But Hime doesn't say a single word, not even a thank you, and just walks away. Later that day, while taking a shower, Hime thinks everything over and comes to a decision. So the following day, she shows up in the basement dressed like a retired stripper and asks Harumi what he thinks of her outfit. But when Harumi tells her she is plotless and flatter than a surfboard, Hime gets pissed. But instead of attacking him as usual, she cuts the rope binding him and tells him he can stay in her house since he basically has nowhere else to go. Before Harumi can even agree, Hime asks if he wants anything, and the useless nerd immediately remembers the one thing he has always wanted: books. So Hime takes him to her personal library filled with books, and Harumi is over the moon. He's more jolly than a fat, oily brat getting pizza as a birthday present. While excitedly scanning the shelves, Harumi suddenly spots books from his favorite author, Akiyama, and won't stop talking about them. But Hime asks why he is screaming her name. Harumi is confused because he just learned her name is Hime, not Akiyama Shinobu. That's when Hime reveals that Akiyama Shinobu is her pen name, while Hime is her real name. Harumi instantly freezes, realizing he has just been adopted by his favorite author. He immediately begs her to finish writing the final volume of Lust, which triggers Hime's temper once again. And just like that, Harumi starts living with Hime, the favorite author he has always simped over. But his peaceful life doesn't last long, because one day, while watching TV, Harumi sees a report about his own death and the culprit behind it. That's when he remembers something painful. His wallet is still at home, and inside it was his beloved bookstore points card. He had been saving those points for ages, and now they're gone forever. However, Hime notices his gloomy expression, and later that night, she makes a secret phone call to inquire about the robbery victim's belongings and his home address. The following day, after breakfast, Hime tells Harumi they're going out for an important job, which immediately confuses him. But before he can question her, the pancake chest menace grabs her scissors and heads out, so he has no choice but to follow. On the way, Harumi ends up with a full view of Haime's buns because of how he's positioned behind her. He instantly gets embarrassed, but Hime laughs and calls him a pervy little doggy. Harumi denies it and claims he's only interested in 2D girls. Soon, they run into the Afro shop owner again. The poor guy freezes the moment he sees Hime because he's still traumatized from when she sliced open Harumi's cage like it was a birthday cake. She tells him she hates Afro hair because it's annoying to cut, making him even more terrified. They keep walking, and on the way, some blonde girl and a group of men in black show up and start performing some ridiculous act to impress Hime. But Hime doesn't give two pangs about them and ignores them like spoiled leftovers. When they arrive at the bookstore Harumi used to visit back when he was still human, he stops and gets emotional. Hime notices and asks if he wants to go inside, but Harumi says no, so they continue on their journey. Some hours later, they finally arrive at Harumi's old apartment, and when he asks why they're there, Hime tells him she has some unsettled score to settle. According to the news report she saw earlier, Harumi's room was listed as 102. But Harumi quickly tells her the report was wrong because his actual room number was 101, and this mistake has been happening for a long time. He tries explaining how it all works, but Hime insists on checking room 102 anyway. Harumi reminds her they don't even have the key, but Hime casually pulls out a huge ring of keys and explains that she has connections because her sister works for the police. With one of the keys, she unlocks the door to room 102. Inside, Harumi immediately notices a newspaper on the floor about the bar robbery and how the robber and the bar owner had planned the entire operation. Harumi gets tense, knowing something is off. Before he can say anything, Hime tells him the robber who shot him has been using this place as a hideout. She explains that after escaping the crime scene, the criminal must have found Harumi's wallet, the apartment key, his ID, and even his library point card. Since the guy had nowhere to go, he came here. But when he tried the key, he would have realized it belonged to room 101, not 102, so he slipped into the perfect hiding spot instead. The police never checked room 101, and neither did Harumi's family. Harumi is shocked hearing all this, but before he can wrap his head around the mess, they hear a noise outside. They rush out immediately and see the culprit walking out of room 101, and the moment the useless thief sees them, he takes off running down the hallway. But Hime and Harumi chase him across the building and into the open street until he finally stops and turns around. Harumi says they're here to capture him, but the thief yells that he refuses to get caught again and suddenly charges at Hime. The criminal starts fighting her because apparently he's a firm believer in equal rights, equal beatings, until he lands a punch to her gut, sending her crashing to the ground. But when Harumi looks closer, he sees the man gripping one of Akiyama Shinobu's books in his hand. The criminal pulls another one from his pocket, and Harumi assumes he plans to use the books as shields or makeshift weapons. Instead, the man declares that he can't be arrested until he reads Lust, the final volume of the series. That's when Harumi finally realizes the maniac has been spending his entire time hiding in his apartment, reading Akiyama Shinobu's novels like a limp loser, and the books have completely influenced him. Jaime finds it disturbingly funny that even a wanted thug ended up as one of her readers. She rushes at him, and the two immediately start throwing hands like Jax and Sonya in Mortal Kombat. Harumi realizes the criminal is literally using fighting moves from Akiyama Shinobu's novels, and he's even more shocked watching Hai match every attack perfectly. That's when he finally accepts the truth, that she really is terrifyingly good at martial arts. After a flurry of hits, blocks, and near misses, Hime slips in close and cuts the books right out of the guy's hands, then yanks the rest from his pockets. The thief loses it like she just ripped out the last piece of his soul, but Jaime finishes with a swift kick that sends him tumbling toward the side of a bridge, leaving him dangling and clinging on for dear life. Jaime then casually tells Harumi that if he nudges the man even a little, he'll fall, and nobody is going to hold. A dog responsible for sending a criminal to the afterlife. Harumi is stunned that she's even suggesting such a brutal revenge, but Jaime presses him, reminding him that the guy destroyed his life, and this is his chance to end the story once and for all. However, after a moment of silence, Harumi steps toward the dangling culprit and pulls him back up instead. Haim is floored. She demands to know why he spared him, and Harumi says it's because the guy is now a nerd loser just like him. Jaime argues that this was the perfect chance for revenge, but Harumi stays calm, saying revenge won't magically restore him to his human body. She calls him a liar, so Harumi tells her to read his thoughts if she doesn't believe him. He explains that just being alive in any form is enough, and all he can do now is dedicate himself to being a loyal book simp. Hearing that, Jaime says if he won't finish the guy, then she will, because in her mind, she owes him that much since Harumi died protecting her. That's when Harumi realizes she isn't thinking straight. She's drowning in guilt, blaming herself for everything. When she refuses to listen, Harumi finally snaps, shoves her down, and barks at her to stop taking all the blame onto herself. He tells her he acted on his own choice that day, and none of it was her fault. Jaime fires back that he doesn't know anything about her, but Harumi says he knows her better than anyone because he devoured her books like sacred scripture, and her emotions naturally seeped into him through every page she wrote. While she sits there stunned, Harumi tells her there's no reason for her to cry anymore, which, ironically, just makes her cry even harder. Later, on their way home, Jaime gets emotional again, so she casually pulls out her scissors and suggests cutting open Harumi's chest to figure out how he thinks and understand the weird feeling inside her. Harumi immediately freaks out, but Hime claims that the more you care about someone, the more you want to torture them. Hearing that, Harumi concludes she really is a psychopath. But then Jaime suddenly brightens up and says she's finally found an idea for her latest book. The moment Harumi hears book, it hits him, and he remembers that they forgot to lock up his personal library. He panics and demands they rush back immediately because those books are basically his children. Unfortunately, when the word children comes out of his mouth, Hime starts imagining some bizarre fantasy involving her cheeks and a dog. Harumi immediately snaps her out of it by calling her flat-chested, which makes Hime furious, and she chases him down the street with her scissors. Days later, Harumi dreams about his hot sister from his past human life, Madoka. He's absolutely enjoying the dream, until it suddenly mutates into a nightmare with Hime furious and jealous that he's flirting with another chick right after they talked about procreation. She pulls out her giant scissors and threatens to slice off his eggplant, but Harumi panics and jolts awake, breathing heavily. He sits there wondering why the evil witch is invading his dreams now, but then his mind drifts to his sister Madoka, and he quietly wonders how she's doing. Shortly afterwards, Harumi notices some random girl sprawled face down on the table. He calls out to her, but gets no response. When he walks closer, worried she might be dead, the crazy girl suddenly springs up like a horror movie villain, scaring the life out of him. She starts acting like she just escaped an asylum, even climbing on top of the table. Harumi's first thought is that if Jaime walks in and sees the circus, someone is absolutely losing blood today. But to his shock, when Hime finally shows up, she just stares at the nutcase and calmly tells her to get down from the table and seat. The girl obeys instantly, which only confuses Harumi even more. Jaime then shows Harumi the stranger's ID, and when he reads it, his soul nearly exits his furry body. This mad girl is actually Suzuna, the notorious editor of the legendary author Akiyama Shinobu. As they talk, Jaime asks Suzuna what she thinks of her latest manuscript, and Suzuna bluntly tells her it's complete garbage. Jaime doesn't argue. She accepts the criticism and explains she just hasn't been in the mood to write lately. Trying to help, Suzuna suggests Jaime take a break or maybe go on vacation, but Jaime argues that too much change would only stress her out more. Then Suzuna fires off an even crazier idea. She jokes that Jaime should consider getting fake milk jugs for her chopping board chest since she looks like a sissy guy. She even slams her own enormous cannons on the table and says she'd donate some milky volume if she could. Harumi panics because he knows exactly how angry Jaime gets whenever someone insults her chest. And just like he predicts, Jaime snaps and immediately attacks Suzuna with her scissors. However, she only manages to slice part of Suzuna's collar. But Harumi is already freaking out that Jaime really went after a human with a weapon. But he is shocked when Suzuna thanks Jaime, saying the cut excites her, and it makes her feel much alive. A few minutes later, Suzuna suddenly accuses Jaime of adopting a dog behind her back. When Jaime demands to know why she'd ever need her editor's approval to adopt a dog, Suzuna claims it's basically cheating on her with another pet when she is already her pet. Turning to Harumi, Suzuna insists he must love getting cut by Hime. But Harumi is horrified, wondering how any sane person would enjoy being attacked with scissors. After all her crazy rambling, Suzuna finally gets down to business and tells Hime they still have plenty of time in the schedule, so she can write at whatever pace feels right. Meanwhile, Harumi remembers Hime's fight with the bar thief and realizes she only gets her creative spark back whenever something unhinged happens in her life. When he cautiously brings it up, Hime immediately brushes off the idea as nonsense. Before leaving that night, Suzuna mentions that there is a criminal in the area called the Slasher who goes about attacking people, and then warns Hime to stay alert. Later, as Harumi reads an article about the Slasher cases, he casually asks Hime when her procrastination even began. Jaime replies that it started around August, which Harumi remembers as the same month the whole cafe robbery disaster happened. While Harumi tries to connect the dots, Hime casually claims her lack of productivity is his fault, saying everything has been off since he barged into her life. Harumi assumes she's just blaming him for entertainment, but before he can argue, Hime carves designs into his furry skin with her scissors as punishment. Weeks later, Suzuna barges in again to check whether Jaime has finally started writing. When Jaime admits she hasn't touched a single page, Suzuna suggests flipping through magazines for inspiration. She then whips out one magazine that features a long report on the recent slasher attacks. Harumi studies it and notices that every victim was targeted at night while walking alone. Fed up with Suzuna's non-stop pestering, Jaime immediately thinks of a way to get rid of her and suggests that Suzuna volunteer as bait to lure the slasher out. She tells Suzuna she might get injured or even die in the process, but promises to massage her massive juggernauts as a reward if she succeeds. Hearing this, Suzuna gets way too excited and sprints out of the house like she's been handed a sacred quest. Once the crazy girl leaves, Jaime notices Harumi's worried expression. When she asks what's bothering him, Harumi says he's worried about the attacks. So Ime suggests they look into the slasher case themselves. The following day, they start their investigation by stopping at a bookstore to gather information. There, they meet a staff member who shares a rumor about a girl who scared off the slasher simply by holding one of Akiyama Shobu's books. While another customer chimes in, saying most victims were attacked right after purchasing Akiyama Shinobu's work. As they continue their investigation, they suddenly cross paths with that yellow-haired weirdo who keeps doing everything she can to get Jaime's attention. As always, Jaime tunes her out like background noise. But when Harumi finally gets a proper look at the blonde stalker, he realizes she's Maxie, the superstar idol who also happens to be a best-selling author like Jaime. In the country, there are 3 young popular beauty authors: Jaime, Maxie, and one other random chick. But the real question on Harumi's mind is why Maxie is following Jaime around like a creep. Jaime, clearly irritated, explains that Maxie has been tailing her a lot lately, and she still can't figure out how that idiot even discovered her real identity. Maxie smugly explains she just wants to observe how a thriving, best-selling author, other than herself, shines on a daily basis. Still, Jaime keeps walking without giving Maxie a single crumb of attention. This pisses Maxie off, and she accuses Jaime of being scared, which instantly strikes Jaime's overblown ego. To make things worse, Maxie takes off her jacket to show off her 2 humongous dumplings and starts mocking Jaime's pimple-flat chest. That flips Jaime's switch instantly. She whips out her scissors and threatens to snip off Maxie's grade A melons along with the golden hair she's so proud of. But Maxie isn't intimidated, as she fires back that she'll deflate Jaime's non-existent balloons in return. But before the situation escalates into full-blown cosmetic warfare, one of Maxie's men in black bouncers rushes over and drags the idol away. Later that evening, Harumi and Hime sit together trying to piece everything they've gathered so far. Based on their investigation, they've realized that Hime's books have been involved in 3 separate slasher incidents. But while they're still trying to connect the dots, a scream erupts outside, and they immediately rush toward the source. When they arrive, they discover a slasher attack just went down, and this time, the victim is the Afro dude, who suffered a catastrophic haircut from the culprit. As the crowd gathers, Hime scans the area and spots a shady silhouette slipping away, so she immediately chases after the dude. Left alone, Harumi starts piecing things together. For the Afro dude to get attacked by the slasher, he must have had one of Akiyama's books on him. Trusting his questionable instincts, Harumi decides to look around for it. His search leads him into a dark corner where he spots one of Akiyama Shobu's books suspiciously tucked under a basket propped up by a stick. The dumb dog doesn't consider for even a millisecond that this might be a trap. He just waddles in like a gullible, brain-dead moron and steps right under the basket to grab the book. Instantly, the basket drops over his head. Everything goes black for a sec, and when Harumi opens his eyes, he is shocked to see himself back in his book-infested crappy room, only to discover that the whole setup was orchestrated by Madoka, his sister. Meanwhile, Hime keeps chasing the suspect through the streets, but he slips out of sight again. But just then, she spots one of her own books lying on the ground, meaning the slasher must have dropped it while fleeing. At the same time, back in room 102, Madoka starts acting like a full-blown mental patient, chanting "brother" over and over, instantly throwing Harumi off. Harumi quickly realizes something is very wrong with her, as this is not the Madoka he remembers. To make things worse, the yandere keeps repeating that they'll live together now and forever, which creeps Harumi out so much that he's fully convinced his sister's brain has taken a one-way trip to Zombieland. A moment later, Madoka brings out a bowl of spicy concoction that can be used in 1,000 ways to die. She tries to feed it to him, and Harumi, horrified, can only pray for divine intervention. Luckily for him, Madoka suddenly freezes, says she forgot the pickles he likes, and hurries out the door to go buy some. The moment she leaves, Harumi panics and desperately tries to wriggle out of the ropes binding him.
Oh my god.
But before he can escape, Hime appears outside the window like a drunk father coming home at 3 a.m. Harumi freezes, but before he can react, Hime drags him back to her place, ties him up again, and starts grilling him about who he was talking to earlier. Harumi explains it was his sister, but Hime demands proof, leaving him baffled over how he's supposed to verify something like that. Hime eventually unties him, and once she's convinced he's telling the truth, she asks why Madoka had kidnapped him for 3 whole days, to which Harumi has absolutely no answer. Shortly after, Hime shows Harumi the book she picked up from the suspect she chased, and he's stunned. This basically confirms her novels are tied to every slasher incident so far. With all this evidence stacking up, Harumi starts suspecting the slasher must be someone who seriously hates Akiyama Shinobu. After thinking through everything, he begins wondering if the culprit might actually be his unhinged sister, Madoka, especially since she used one of Akiyama's books to trap him and somehow recognized him even in dog form. The next day, Hime and Harumi return to room 102 to look for Madoka, but she's already vanished. They wander around town searching for clues when Suzuna suddenly appears to report yet another slasher case. But Hime snaps at her instantly, reminding her she promised to offer herself as bait. Before leaving, Suzuna mentions a rumor about a girl spotted crying in the park while shredding one of Hime's books to pieces. Hearing this, Harumi and Hime exchange a look, both immediately thinking of Madoka. When Hime pushes for more details, Suzuna explains that the short-haired girl was cutting the book while chanting Akiyama Shinobu. That's all the confirmation they need. So Harumi and Hime immediately rush to the park and find torn pages scattered everywhere. As they scan the area, Madoka suddenly appears and aggressively demands to know who Hime is. The two girls kick off the enmity and instantly start throwing insults at each other like rivals fighting over some guy. It almost escalates into a full-on brawl, but Harumi throws himself between them, begging Hime not to hurt his sister. Hime argues that confronting Madoka directly might be the fastest way to solve the case, but Harumi, panicking, blurts out that if her hands are itching to scissors cut something, she can take his dog-eat pleasure rod instead. Hime actually pauses to consider it, which terrifies Harumi even more. But before she can follow through, she decides to ask Madoka why there's a burnt book on the ground. Madoka panics when she hears a piece survived, since she believes she burned all of Harumi's Akiyama Shinobu books to protect him. But right then, Hime tosses a smoke bomb and snatches Harumi away like a shinobi disappearing into the night. When they finally return home, Harumi tells Hime that Madoka might genuinely be tied to the slasher incidents. Hime says they shouldn't rush to conclusions, but she admits the possibility is pretty high. Harumi can't understand why Madoka would do something like this, so Hime puts on her Sherlock Holmes thinking cap and starts laying out theories. She believes Madoka is just a jealous gremlin who doesn't want Akiyama Shinobu emotionally stealing Harumi away from her. Harumi still can't wrap his head around it, so Hime explains further. Back when Madoka lived with him in his past life, Harumi probably talked about books non-stop like an addicted nerd, which couldn't have been fun for her. Madoka may have felt like Shinobu's novels were slowly taking her brother away, page by page. Even if it sounds irrational, Hime says emotional spirals often start from tiny, painfully real seeds. On top of that, Jaime theorizes that Madoka might believe Harumi died because he stayed in Tokyo for Akiyama Shinobu's books. So in her mind, destroying Akiyama Shinobu is her way of bringing him back, at least emotionally. Even with all of Jaime's Einstein logic, Harumi still refuses to fully believe his sister would go that far. But he admits that if Madoka truly is the slasher, then he'll be the one to stop her. He then asks Jaime to lend him her strength, since he's nothing but a weak puppy. And after a brief pause, Hime agrees, but warns him that if she's helping, everything has to be done exactly the way she wants it. But right then, Madoka makes a Batman entrance by crashing through the glass roof, and immediately she grabs Harumi. Madoka reveals she placed a tracking device on Harumi, which made it stupidly easy for her to find their location. But when Hime asks if she really broke into her house because she thought she was Akiyama Shinobu, Madoka freezes.
What?
That's when it hits her that Hime is actually Akiyama Shinobu. The revelation sends Madoka into instant rage mode as she accuses Hime of stealing her brother. Jaime fires right back and accuses her of breaking and entering. Madoka gets even more worked up, insisting Hime drove Harumi insane and refusing to accept that he died. In her mind, Harumi would never abandon his books, so obviously he must have come back as a dog. Haim, completely unimpressed with the level of delusion she's witnessing, tells Madoka to stop hiding behind fantasies and accept reality. Her brother is dead. She says Madoka can hate her, blame her, scream all she wants, but none of that will bring Harumi back. Hime then pushes harder, asking if Madoka seriously thinks her actions would make Harumi happy in any universe. Madoka snaps, insisting Hime knows nothing about her brother's feelings. But Hime flips it right back, asking if Madoka even understands what Harumi would want. Because if she did, she'd know he would never approve of the disaster she's been causing. Madoka is stunned and demands to know how Hime could possibly claim to understand her brother better than she does. But Hime calmly explains that she understands her readers because she pours her emotions and thoughts into her books, and in return, she can feel theirs. Then Hime finally exposes the truth. She tells Madoka that Harumi died a hero while trying to save her from a robber, and she can still relive the memory like it happened yesterday. Hearing this, Madoka breaks down in tears, but Hime continues. She tells her she will never forget Harumi's death, and that she keeps writing partly to honor him. Hime ends by saying that if Harumi were still alive, he would never condone the nonsense Madoka has been pulling. Ashamed of everything she's done, Madoka finally accepts the truth and then immediately does the most unhinged thing possible. She grabs dog Harumi, leaps out of the skyscraper like Catwoman, and takes him to an open field. There, guilt crashing down on her, Madoka mutters that there's no way this dog could actually be her brother. Madoka recounts how she came to the city determined to find Harumi. She even set a trap using Akiyama's book, convinced Harumi would be the only nerd dumb enough to fall for it. And when the dog did fall for it, she convinced herself it had to be him. Now she realizes she can't keep running from reality. It's finally time to face what she's been avoiding. But suddenly, Hime shows up, casually explaining that she also placed a tracker on her dog, which is how she knew exactly where they were. She isn't interested in long conversations and simply suggests they fight it out. Madoka agrees instantly and summons her special low-budget Power Ranger weapon known as Tuna Eater. Harumi, seeing the weapon, is horrified, realizing he never truly knew his sister. Hime is ready as well, pulling out her scissors, and after plenty of girly trash talk, both of them charge in. The fight escalates quickly as Madoka transforms Tuna Eater into a chainsaw and starts slicing through trees like she plans to turn Hime into a jigsaw puzzle. Her genius plan immediately backfires when she wedges herself into a tree trunk, leaving her dumpers exposed to be spanked. Hime, seeing this, doesn't waste the opportunity and shatters her chainsaw with one clean strike. Madoka feels defeated, but her stubbornness kicks back in. This time, she transforms the chainsaw into a full-blown bazooka and fires at Hime. But to everyone's shock, Hime blocks the blast with her scissors and splits it cleanly in two. Madoka cannot believe what she just saw. She drops to her knees, overwhelmed and embarrassed. Strangely, the fight ends without bitterness. On the walk back, the two girls start talking like besties, and a weird but genuine friendship begins forming out of the chaos, surprising even Harumi. When Hime asks why Madoka shredded her books in the first place, Madoka explains that Harumi once told her it's better to destroy books than sell them to used bookstores, since resales steal royalties from authors. Hime is stunned, having assumed the whole thing was tied to the slasher case. But Madoka is totally confused, insisting she has no idea who the slasher even is. She says the only crimes she committed were destroying Jaime's books and abducting her dog. Hime is stunned. She starts grilling Madoka about every slashing incident that has happened lately, only to finally realize Madoka is actually innocent and completely clueless about the whole slasher situation. But just then, everything clicks, and Harumi finally figures out who the real culprit is. So later that night, outside Hime's building, Harumi calls out the true slasher. Surprisingly, Suzuna materializes from the shadows like she's been waiting for her cue and calmly asks how long he suspected her. Harumi explains that he first realized the truth the last time he and Jaime met her, and she conveniently reported yet another slasher attack. Harumi then delivers an over-the-top breakdown of every clue Suzuna idiotically left behind. Piece by piece, the whole truth comes together. Suzuna engineered the slasher incidents because she believed scaring Hime would snap her out of her writer's block and force her to write again. With the truth now in the open, Suzuna confesses she is guilty and then says she'd do anything to help Hime become productive. But Harumi immediately shuts her down, saying Hime doesn't need theatrics and chaos to improve. Suzuna doubts him at first, but Harumi insists that Hime's bond with her readers is what drives her, not stage trauma. Suzuna finally accepts this, declaring her only wish is for Akiyama Shinobu to rise as one of the greatest authors of all time. She even hints that Harumi is close enough to Jaime emotionally to influence her writing, and wonders aloud what masterpiece Jaime would create if Harumi just happened to die. Harumi panics and protests, but Suzuna casually brushes off his complaints like his limpy pickle means nothing. Then, Jaime suddenly shouts from the rooftop, startling both of them. She announces she knows everything about Suzuna's schemes and orders her to sit. Jaime proudly declares she overcame her slump all on her own. As punishment, she tosses her manuscript into the air and commands Suzuna to catch every single page before it hits the ground. Suzuna scrambles like a rabid squirrel trying to grab them, while Harumi stands there, baffled. Hime then explains she actually regained her motivation after meeting Suzuna the day before. Meanwhile, Suzuna is flipping through the manuscripts like she just uncovered forbidden treasure, practically vibrating with excitement. However, Jaime gives her a warning glare for ever doubting she could overcome her slump alone, though she can't fully hide how happy she is to finally feel productive again. But Harumi kills the vibe instantly by pointing out that none of it matters until she actually finishes her book, Lust. The next day, Madoka parts ways with Jaime and Harumi. Before she leaves, Hime tells her that if she likes the dog so much, she can treat him as Harumi and visit anytime she wants, which makes Madoka light up at the offer. Once she's gone, Harumi voices his worries about the still unsolved slasher cases. That's when Suzuna pops out of nowhere and casually drops the bomb that she ran into the real culprit while spreading her rumors. She says she beat the guy senseless and stuffed him into the garbage. Jaime is furious hearing this, so Suzuna immediately drops into a punishment-ready kneeling pose, fully prepared to accept whatever consequences await her for crossing yet another line. A few days later, Harumi goes out to buy some books for himself. While waiting for help at the bookstore, he starts getting anxious, praying that Yayoi, the girl who terrifies him, doesn't show up while he's still inside. But just as he's about to leave with his purchase, his nightmare becomes reality. Yayoi appears out of nowhere and immediately tickles him without mercy, causing him to smoke like a grilled fish. She waves goodbye like nothing had happened and casually mentions she might be leaving the city soon, shocking him even more. Before walking off, she gives him extra emotional damage by tickling him again, making him scream. When Harumi returns home from this humiliation, Hime confronts him on the spot. She accuses him of cheating on her just to get touched by another girl and threatens to cut him into tiny fish baits if he even thinks about making a move on Yayoi. Harumi panics and explains that Yayoi only said she and her sister, who runs the bookstore, will be leaving the city soon, and he's simply sad that he won't be able to buy books anymore, which is basically his worst nightmare. Even after his explanation, Hime coldly suggests he just find another bookstore or order online, but Harumi insists it's not that simple. He says he has a deep sentimental history with this specific shop. When Harumi asks if she wants to hear about his history with the shop, Hime refuses and tells him to go read somewhere quietly so she can focus on her manuscript. Harumi, annoyed but stubborn, decides he's going to tell the story anyway, hoping she'll eventually crack. Realizing the dog won't stop pestering her, Jaime warns that if he wastes her time, she'll shave every strand of fur off his body. Then she puts her scissors away, which is her awkward way of saying she'll listen. Harumi then starts by recounting the events of when he had just started school, like some washed-up grandpa reliving his glory days. Back then, he had just visited his new apartment and was waiting for the manager, who was running late. Trying to kill time, he suddenly felt the overwhelming urge to buy books and wandered into a nearby bookstore. The moment he stepped inside, he was mesmerized by the massive selection. As he browsed, he overheard a noisy Karen loudly complaining about a book she'd read, calling it boring and saying the entire shop should shut down because of it. Harumi instantly recognized the book as one of Akiyama Shobu's works and immediately got irritated. The cashier tried calming the old tramp down, but she wouldn't stop yapping. Unable to hold himself back, Harumi walked up to the counter and called the woman an old dumb fossil for slandering such a masterpiece. Then he launched into a heated rant about how all old people should just travel to Mars already. It was only after finishing his speech that he realized the loud woman had left the store 20 minutes earlier, leaving him ranting at empty air like a malfunctioning NPC. Suddenly, an elderly man pops out of nowhere and tries to crack open Harumi's skull with a baseball bat. But Harumi dodges the swing like a corrupt politician avoiding jail time. The cashier girl quickly steps in, explaining that Harumi had actually defended her from the troublesome customer earlier. The old man, who turns out to be her father and the owner of the bookstore, instantly drops to his knees to apologize the moment he understands the situation. As compensation, he tells Harumi to pick any book he wants. Over the moon, Harumi chooses several, and the man is so impressed by his taste that he gives him even more books for free and hands him a point card for future visits. That moment marks the beginning of Harumi's attachment to the shop. The point card didn't just track his purchases. To him, it symbolized the friendship he'd formed with the old man. By the time he finishes telling his boring, nerdy story, he notices Jaime has practically dozed off into slumberland.
This is so boring.
Leaving him talking to himself. Despite being told to stay away, Harumi heads to the store the next day to check on things. Just as he arrives, Yayoi storms out, scoops him up like loose laundry, and sprints to a nearby park. There, she cries bitterly, confessing she's worried because her sister doesn't seem to care that the bookstore might shut down, and she refuses to let that happen. She proudly presents her genius plan to save the store, a hat advertising the bookstore, which they will wear while walking around town for maximum publicity. Harumi can't believe how far this anime gremlin is willing to go. Before he can complain, Yayoi plops the cap onto his head, igniting his embarrassment into a full meltdown. As they wander through town promoting the shop, Harumi hates every second of the humiliation. People stare, especially women, who find him adorable and tickle him as they pass, making him want to curl up and evaporate. He silently begs the universe not to let anyone he knows witness this madness. After the humiliating promotion stunt, Harumi and Yayoi finally return to the park. Yayoi, still crushed about losing her father's store, suddenly bursts into tears. Harumi freezes, completely clueless about how to handle a crying girl. His panic spikes when he hears the snip of scissors behind him and realizes Jaime has arrived. She immediately accuses him of cheating and making another girl cry. She calls him a dirty dog and threatens to cut out his pebbles and make scrambled eggs out of them. Harumi, terrified, asks how she even found him. Jaime casually reminds him of the tracker she slapped on him and assures him that no matter where he runs, even if he escapes into space, she will find him. Turning to Yayoi, Jaime softens her voice and tells the little girl to head home. Yayoi hesitates, worried her sister will be angry at her for something she said earlier. Jaime relates, mentioning she also has an older sister, and they fight sometimes too. However, she advises Yayoi not to let small problems break her down. When Yayoi admits she's scared her sister might truly hate her, Jaime encourages her to apologize if needed. Taking Himi's advice to heart, Yayoi heads back to the bookstore. Once they arrive, Yayoi apologizes to her sister, Sakura, for her earlier behavior, and Sakura immediately hugs her. After things settle down, Jaime brings up the store's situation, mentioning that one of her acquaintances is a hardcore fan desperate to keep the shop alive. Sakura is surprised hearing this and reassures Jaime that the store isn't going anywhere, even though their father keeps giving away more books than he actually sells, like a deranged Santa with zero business sense. Curious, Hime asks Yayoi where she even heard that the bookstore was closing. Yayoi explained she overheard their parents arguing and jumped to the conclusion that divorce was imminent and the bookstore would shut down. Everyone freezes, stunned that the little girl's entire meltdown came from binge-watching too many Spanish soap operas. But Sakura clarifies that the argument wasn't serious at all, though their mother did physically assault their dad during it. Right then, their deadbeat dad bursts into the room, looking all beat up but smiling like it's nothing. Yayoi worries that her mom keeps pounding the life out of her dad, but Sakura gently explains that this is just how their parents express love. She calls it tough love, and reassures Yayoi that the shop isn't going anywhere. Hearing this, the little girl lights up with relief, overjoyed like the adorable, clueless little gremlin she is. Weeks later, Harumi is peacefully enjoying his book when Haim barges in, announcing she's on a mission to find something important. She says she needs his help, but Harumi, too absorbed in his reading to care, immediately declines and says he doesn't give two nuts about whatever she's looking for. Haim obviously isn't taking that answer. She calmly threatens that if he refuses, he'll have plenty of time to read 6 feet underground. Terrified, Harumi's brain snaps into survival mode, and he nervously asks what she's even looking for. When Hime says she's searching for her missing bra, Harumi freezes. What? He never imagined someone with such a flat, plotless chest would ever need one. Before he can comment, Jaime raises her scissors as a warning and demands they start the search immediately. Harumi tries to argue that he's terrible at finding lost items, but Jaime fires back that he's a dog, so he should just track the scent. Acting on that logic, Harumi lunges toward her to sniff her, but Jaime smacks him into the wall on reflex, demanding to know what kind of pervy nonsense he's pulling. Flustered, Harumi explains he needs her scent to track the bra. Embarrassed but determined, Natsuno reluctantly agrees. Harumi, however, immediately fumbles the task and accidentally grabs the empty space where her jugs would be if nature had been kinder. This pisses Jaime off so badly that she launches him into the wall again and calls him a filthy degenerate for trying to grope his master's knockers without permission. But Harumi fires back that her chest is an empty territory with nothing to even grab, which only makes things worse. Jaime, furious, instantly binds him and suspends him in the air like a Christmas ornament. Shortly afterwards, Jaime finally unties him, and Suzuna, who happens to be in the house, joins the search party for the missing bra. Jaime stresses that this one is her favorite bra, and then explains that it's lace with a delicate design. However, she warns Harumi not to stare if he finds it first. Meanwhile, Harumi is so deep into his book that he completely forgets the mission. Jaime eventually catches him hiding in the library and tears into him for slacking off. Fed up with being pushed around, Harumi finally snaps and vents his frustrations. Hime's response is immediate. She throws her scissors at him like a ninja, nearly slicing off his sausage. Harumi dodges but crashes into a bookshelf, knocking down a box that lands on his head. Seeing this, Jaime panics because that box contains her top-level secrets. When Harumi opens the box, he finds a Bustbuster 3000 inside, which shocks him. But instead of insulting Hime's flat chest as always, Harumi sarcastically compliments her for admitting her weakness, but then assures her that with a chest like hers, the machine won't work anyway. This roasting gets under Hime's skin, so as always, she disciplines Harumi with her scissors. Frustrated but determined to solve the mystery, Jaime expands her search area and heads to the gym, suspecting she might have left the bra there. Thinking outside the box, Suzuna proposes that the bra might have been stolen by an underwear thief. Shockingly, Hime thinks she might actually have a point, and vows that if that's true, the culprit will be flayed and the bra retrieved inside out. Harumi is horrified by the sheer brutality and starts wondering if Jaime is naturally evil or secretly inherited demon genetics from the Uchiha clan. Right then, a group of muscle gym rats shows up, so Jaime decides to stay behind and focus on her chest workout while Harumi heads home, eager to read in peace. When Harumi gets home, he settles in with his book, but suddenly discovers Jaime's bra tangled inside his blanket, and panic hits him like a frying pan. He realizes he must have grabbed it by accident the cold night before while searching for a makeshift pillow. Remembering Haime's earlier threat about skinning anyone alive who might have touched her melon cover, Harumi starts freaking out, fully convinced he is dead meat. Terrified of the incoming doom, he bolts out of the house and goes into hiding. When Jaime returns from the gym and notices he's missing, she immediately begins searching for her runaway dog. Her first stop is the bookstore Harumi usually visits, where she runs into Sakura, who unfortunately can't provide any useful information about Harumi's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Harumi ventures deep into the forest far from home and starts digging a hole to bury Hime's bra, desperate to erase all evidence before she discovers the truth. As he digs, he hears faint singing drifting through the air. Curious, he follows the sound and finds a maid happily singing like some low-budget Cinderella. Harumi instantly recognizes the lyrics from a famous, award-winning book and completely forgets about his evidence-erasing mission. Right as Harumi gets lost in the moment and starts harmonizing with the girl, he sneezes, blowing his cover. The maid freezes, mortified that someone witnessed her private performance. Her shame instantly mutates into rage, and in a flash she transforms her broom into a weapon like she's unlocking a hidden bankai, then charges at Harumi with full intent to send him straight to Hueco Mundo. At the same time, Hime is still frantically searching for Harumi when she suddenly senses his thoughts screaming for help. She sprints toward the source of his panic and arrives just in time to yank him away from an incoming truck-kun. Realizing Harumi was seconds away from being isekai'd by a deranged maid, Hime immediately draws her scissors, ready to face the lunatic. But just as the fight is about to begin, the maid gets distracted by the scent of roasted potatoes from a nearby ad and withdraws, though she ominously promises they'll cross swords again. A few minutes later, Hime asks Harumi if he's alright, and Harumi is stunned by her sudden concern. But as she checks him for injuries, she finds her missing bra tucked inside his dog strap and freezes, horrified that Harumi must have seen the little doggy symbol on it. Harumi quickly puts two and two together and concludes that the dog symbol must mean she likes little dogs, then starts mocking her. That flips Hime straight into villain mode, and she threatens to clap him into another dimension for even touching her treasured item. Some days later, Harumi and Hime head to a resort to relax after a stressful week, but instead, the moment they arrive, Harumi is horrified. place is decorated with bizarre, intimidating weapons, making him wonder if they accidentally booked an Airbnb for Vikings. Jaime sees his disturbed expression and immediately tells him to shut up and enjoy himself, insisting that overthinking will ruin everything. While exploring the inn, Harumi notices a whole section dedicated to books, which instantly excites him. But before he can dive into the shelves, Madoka suddenly scoops him up and plants him on her bubbling chest. Horrified, Harumi demands to know what she's doing there, and Madoka explains that Jaime invited her as a guest. Jaime jumps in, saying there's no need for formalities because one day they'll be sisters-in-law. A little while later, Madoka notices there's only one futon and asks if she should get another. But Hime shyly refuses, insisting the room is only for her and her dog. But Harumi misunderstands completely and assumes Jaime had booked the room for just her and Madoka. The pervy dog immediately starts imagining all the girly scissors activities Hime and Madoka would do that night. But Jaime slams him against the wall with her scissors, furious at the imaginary nonsense playing out in his brain. Jaime then tells Mocha that she's arranged a separate room for her and asks her to pack her things. Madoka agrees, and as she goes, she tries to carry Harumi with her, but Natsuno stops her, saying she doesn't need to be alone with a furry animal. Madoka insists she has to take the dog with her since she hasn't seen her brother properly in a while, and she immediately warns Jaime not to interfere between siblings. But Hime gets offended, and the girls are seconds away from going violent on each other when suddenly Hime's alarm goes off. In a surprisingly peaceful twist, Hime suggests they hit the hot spring instead of fighting. Madoka agrees right away, leaving Harumi bewildered as the two drop their squabble to go soak their juggernauts. At the hot spring, Jaime finds Sakura there, and when she asks why she's at the resort, Sakura explains her school club came for a trip. Just then, Ime notices a pink-haired shy girl named Ami, awkwardly hiding nearby, refusing to join them. Sakura invites her to come over, but Ami is too much of an antisocial loser to mingle. Suddenly, Hime's eyes land on the massive cargo Ami is packing on her chest, and she immediately gets jealous for being cursed with Zero Bust. The next day, as Harumi and Jaime walk through the resort streets, Harumi notices Jaime is deeply absorbed in a small pink book. Curious, he demands to know what she's reading, but Hime refuses to share any details. Their walk eventually leads them to a whetstone factory where Hime unexpectedly runs into the same unhinged maid from before. The maid is shocked to see her again so soon and instantly looks ready to resume their unfinished beating session. But before things escalate, Hime spots a whetstone nearby and asks about it. The maid proudly confirms it's hers and says her brand only produces the highest quality stones. Intrigued, Jaime decides she wants one too, so she can maintain her scissors at maximum lethality. Back at the inn, Madoka is struggling miserably in the kitchen, desperately trying to cook for Harumi with pure love and zero competence. She laments not having her trusty tuna eater weapon, which would have made things easier. Meanwhile, Hime finally acquires her whetstone and begins sharpening her scissors with disturbing focus. But Maxie randomly appears and immediately cannonballs into the hot spring. She then challenges Haim to an endurance contest to see who can stay underwater the longest. But Haim ignores her again, as your crush ignores you and continues sharpening her blade. Elsewhere in the inn, Harumi notices a bunch of dudes shuffling through the halls like they're possessed by some demon and marching toward the bathhouse with weapons in hand. Horrified, he bolts off to alert Hime, but by the time he reaches the place, it's already too late. The dudes break into the bathhouse and Jaime instantly shifts into combat mode. She recalls dealing with stalkers back in her hometown when one creep tried to spy on her, and the memory fuels her confidence in this new disaster. The attackers clash with Haim, but she defends herself with her scissors, all the while grumbling that they're still not in perfect condition. Harumi, desperate to buy her time, charges at the attackers like one of DC's super pets and starts pelting the intruders with bath balls to distract them, while Jaime prepares her newly sharpened blades. During the chaos, one attacker nearly sends Harumi straight to Animal Paradise, but Madoka bursts in with her chainsaw and slices through the danger, saving him at the last moment. Haim jumps back into the fight, and together they push the invaders back. But in the middle of the frenzy, Haim's tiny pink treasure book falls to the floor, and a stampede crushes it into pulp. The next morning, the resort manager apologizes profusely for the battle that happened the day before, accompanied by the confused workers who claim they remember nothing. However, Jaime and the others prepare to leave, and on the way, Harumi, drained and irritated, grumbles that even a peaceful resort couldn't offer them actual rest. But Jaime pats him and assures him that next time it'll be only the two of them coming to the resort. A few days later, Hime and Harumi swing by the bookstore to pick up new reads. While Sakura helps them, Harumi casually asks Jaime about her stalker situation. Jaime shrugs and says she's been targeted multiple times since the last encounter, proudly bragging that she fought them all off on her own, flexing her supposed warrior skills. Harumi, however, notes that this isn't some light stalker problem anymore. Things have clearly escalated into something much more serious. Right then, Hime spots an obvious amateur stalker watching and lurking, proving Harumi's point instantly. Meanwhile, Sakura recommends a book to Hime, and as she hands it over, Harumi recognizes it as the one he saw at the hot spring but didn't get the chance to read. He doesn't know the author, but being the nerdy simp he is, he trusts Sakura's taste and assumes it must be good if she suggested it. With the new book in hand, they head home, and the moment they enter the apartment, Harumi senses something is off. Using his freakishly sharp animal instincts, Harumi notices the place has been subtly ransacked. Haim, blissfully oblivious, doesn't notice a single thing, making Harumi marvel at her zero observation skills while he tries to break it down for her. He explains that before they left, there were exactly 99,822 books on the shelves. Now there are 99,823, meaning someone added a book. Haim is stunned at his accuracy, and Harumi, feeling like a mathematical prodigy, starts giving her a mini lecture on sharpening her mind and actually paying attention to details. Curious about the added book, Hime asks if he can find it, and Harumi immediately retrieves the exact book Sakura handed them earlier, shocking both of them. For a moment, they question each other's memory, wondering if one of them simply forgot buying it. After a beat, they both reach the same conclusion. Someone must have planted it, likely the stalker. But Hime is baffled as to how anyone could have entered without triggering the apartment's tight security. Just then, she notices Harumi flipping through the book and scolds him for reading at a time like this. Calmly, Harumi tells her this is their only lead, and if they want to understand what they're dealing with, they need to examine the book first. Impressed by his logic, Natsuno picks up the second copy to read, determined to uncover the truth. After studying the book, Harumi asks what she thinks of it. Hime says it's far too polished to be a beginner's work. In her opinion, a seasoned author must have deliberately toned down their writing style to mimic an amateur manuscript. Harumi agrees, noting that it reminds him heavily of Akiyama Shobu's rhythm and technique. Hime adds that she even wondered if she herself had written it because the style felt so familiar. Harumi broods for a moment and asks who the author could actually be. They decide to ask ChatGPT, only to discover the author is hiding her real identity, just like Akiyama Shobu does. Determined to know everything about this mysterious writer, Hime immediately calls Suzuna and demands every scrap of information she has on the amateur author known as Makiotaru. But when Suzuna comes to the house, she refuses at first, but instantly agrees once Natsuno promises to cut her for every detail she provides, which sends Suzuna into ecstatic bliss. Seconds later, Suzuna throws herself on the ground in a dramatic back thrust pose, ready to spill intel in exchange for playful punishment. From the information gathered, Hime and Harumi learn that the mysterious author is the daughter of Shuen, a legendary figure in historical fiction known as the Tiger of historical novels. Intrigued and fired up, Natsuno suggests they go find the author immediately, and the two set off on their new quest. As they walk through a familiar neighborhood, Jaime's stalker keeps tailing them from afar. Their route leads them into an abandoned building, when suddenly Hime realizes they're surrounded, almost exactly like what happened at the hot springs. Without warning, she grabs Harumi and pitches him like a baseball straight at the attackers, knocking him out instantly. When Harumi wakes up, the fight is already over. Hime has handled every single intruder with her usual brutality and flair. But then, the stalker finally reveals himself, and to their shock, the mustached mastermind behind everything is none other than Shuen himself. Wasting no time, Hime immediately ties up the old frog on the spot and demands answers. Shuen tries to act like a mafia don, but his old man bravado collapses almost instantly as he begs her to release him because he's elderly and has no control over his bladder. Ignoring his ancient theatrics, Hime presses on, demanding to know how he slipped past her apartments. Security. Shuen explains that he contacted the president of the security company and had him shut off the alarm and unlock the door. Hime is horrified that anyone would comply so easily, but the old geezer reveals the reason. He and the company president were childhood friends, bonded for life after Shuen covered for him during an embarrassing school incident. Since then, the guy has done favors for Shuen whenever asked. Hime then demands to know why he orchestrated all these ridiculous events. Shuen says it was all for his daughter, who desperately wanted a copy of Akiyama Shobu's book. When Natsuno asks why he didn't just mail it to her, the old relic explains that he was afraid Hime herself would corrupt his daughter if she received anything directly from her. He then launches into a long rant about how Hime's confrontational personality attracts chaos and mobs. Hearing about the mobs, Hime realizes Shuen isn't responsible for sending the attackers, so she slices him free and immediately suspects his daughter instead. But Shuen panics and insists he arranged everything himself. When Hime asks what his daughter actually wants, Shuen finally admits her only wish is to meet Akiyama Shinobu face to face. With that information, Hime gets her address, which leads them straight to Harumi's old school. When they arrive, she and Harumi split up to search for the girl. Harumi beelines to the library, and once he's inside, he remembers a document he used to hide in the shelves. He starts digging through the stacks until he finds it, and then begins reading. But shy Amy suddenly appears behind him and asks if he's Harumi, leaving him frozen in complete shock. Back then in school, Amy used to be a very shy, struggling writer, and Harumi, with his hopeless reading addiction, would read her manuscripts. She always copied Akiyama's writing style, and because of that, Harumi genuinely enjoyed her stories and pushed her to keep writing even when she doubted herself. But Amy's self-doubt was too overwhelming, so she and Harumi decides to hide one of her manuscripts in the library shelves, at the back of Akiyama's book where no one else can find or read it. Back in the present, Harumi finally connects the dots and realizes Ami's surname is Osawa. It hits him instantly. She's the mysterious author and Shuin's daughter they've been chasing this whole time. Amy calmly explains that Sakura once mentioned a strange little dog who regularly bought books from the shop. From that alone, she suspected it might be Harumi, though she never fully believed it until she saw him fetch the hidden manuscript from the shelves which only she and the real Harumi had known its whereabouts. That was the moment all her doubts vanished. She tells him she's relieved he's alive and safe, and proudly says she kept her promise to become a published author. But there's regret under her smile. Amy admits she still hasn't finished the manuscript she swore she'd complete. She explains that her father's support did help her debut, but after Harumi died, she hasn't been able to write anything new. Amy then insists the only way she can prove her worth is by surpassing someone she genuinely admires as a writer. That's why she pulled Haim into the situation to begin with, as she had always wanted to challenge herself against the one author she respects enough to measure her own talent by. Meanwhile, inside Harumi's old classroom, Jaime suddenly hears Amy's voice echo through the speakers, announcing that she's got her pet, and that if Haim wants him back, she should come to the rooftop. Haim bolts out of the room instantly. When she arrives, she sees Harumi standing beside Amy completely unharmed, and she immediately gets jealous, assuming Harumi chose to stay with Amy. She calls him a two-timing traitor and is seconds away from turning him into dog sashimi. Before she can act, Amy steps between them, reminding her that authors shouldn't settle disputes with violence. Instead, she proposes a battle of skill and brain power, a writing duel, like an 8-mile showdown but with manuscripts instead of microphones. Haim agrees, and the three head to the library, where Haim and Amy take their seats across from each other, with the atmosphere so tense it practically sizzles. Amy lays out the rules. They each must write a short story exactly 100 manuscript pages long, and whoever finishes first wins. Harumi then gives the signal with a sharp bark, officially starting the contest. As the two scribble away, Amy quickly realizes Jaime writes at twice the speed of the Flash while she's already falling behind. Panic creeps in. And in desperation, Amy starts throwing distractions at her competitor, trying to shake Haim's focus. When her efforts fail, she activates a hidden mechanism behind the bookshelves, causing mirrored panels to slide into view. The reflections catch Haim's eye, and the moment she sees herself, she reflexively reaches for her scissors, nearly stabbing herself on instinct. She struggles to maintain control, fighting against the overwhelming impulse to attack her own reflection. Amy watches calmly, then explains exactly what's happening. She reveals she planted coded keywords throughout her book that allow her to mind control her readers. Since Haim had read a copy earlier at home, Amy can now manipulate her reactions. Hearing this, Haim finally understands why so many random weirdos had been attacking her. They were being mind-controlled after reading Amy's book. Amy declares she will fulfill her promise by defeating Haim in this contest, but Haim refuses to give in to any mind control nonsense. She clenches her pen between her teeth like a crazy squirrel and keeps writing, even while she has zero control over her own hand. Eventually, Jaime wins the writing duel despite everything Amy tried to throw at her. Feeling like a pathetic loser, Amy mutters that she isn't a real author, but Haim shuts that down instantly, telling her that if she has the desire to write and there are readers who want to read her work, then she is an author, no qualifiers needed. Moved by her words, Amy turns to Harumi and shyly asks if he would read her books once she publishes them. Harumi responds with an eager bark, showing his full support. Jaime then kneels beside Amy and says she genuinely wants to read her finished manuscript too. Shocked by their kindness, Amy softly asks if Hime still holds any resentment over everything that's happened. Haim assures her she let go of those feelings a long time ago. The battle ends with warmth instead of conflict, and Amy finally gets the encouragement she needed to believe she truly is an author. A few days later, Harumi is in Sakura's bookstore when Maxi's goon suddenly storms into the shop like he owns the building. He buys every book written by Akiyama Shobu and Himhari Mumiji, the third best female author in the country. This absurd purchase instantly sparks Harumi's curiosity, so he decides to follow them to uncover their motives. But he loses track of them and eventually ends up in a park where he finds Murabachi, the psycho maid from earlier, clutching her deadly broom and dramatically humming yet another creepy tune. Harumi tries to sneak past her unnoticed, but Destiny clearly hates him. He steps on a stick, and the loud crack echoes like a gunshot. Moribachi's head snaps toward him instantly, and because she hates anyone witnessing her performances, she lunges without warning. Harumi, remembering their previous encounters, ducks and dodges with surprising finesse, moving like a dog trained by a Shaolin monk. But no matter how fast he scurries, Moribachi's relentless attacks herd him into a corner. Just as she raises her broom to split him in half, Hime materializes out of nowhere and blocks the strike. Both girls ready themselves to finally start their long-awaited battle, but before the first clash even happens, a deafening noise shakes the entire area. A helicopter descends dramatically, and out steps Maxi, who announces she has purchased every book written by Akiyama Shinobu and Mumiji because she is offended beyond belief that her artistic work is being compared to theirs. That said, Maxi directs everyone's attention to a large object covered nearby, and her bodyguards pull the cloth away, revealing a massive structure. Haim freezes the moment she realizes it's the legendary 9-story tower, an ancient tower where authors compete by writing 9 stories, and whoever finishes the fastest wins. Maxi then climbs to the top, striking a pose worthy of a fashion magazine cover, and challenges both Hime and Mumiji to a writing contest atop the tower. But from out of nowhere, Moribachi launches herself forward with inhuman agility. She crashes into Maxi's bodyguards with so much force that their clothes explode into confetti. She then stands atop the tower like a deranged guardian spirit and declares she won't let a lightweight, airheaded wannabe insult her mistress. Fueled by competitive fire and duty, Hime ascends the tower as well, ready to face Maxi head-on. But just as the showdown is about to erupt, one of Maxi's bodyguards rushes in and drags her back down in a clumsy, overly aggressive attempt to regain order. The entire contest collapses instantly, and both Hime and Moribachi decide to quit on the spot. Later that day at the bookstore, Ami shyly shows up to visit her friend Sakura, but she finds Harumi and Hime there and gets instantly embarrassed. After struggling to get the words out, she finally announces that she has decided to become an author with her own writing style, and everyone is relieved and happy to hear it. Right on cue, Madoka also shows up to announce that she passed her entrance exam and will be attending the same school as Harumi. She says she always wanted to go to the same school her dead brother once attended, and she plans to live life to the fullest for him. Harumi is touched hearing this and feels genuinely proud of how much his sister has grown. A few days later, Suzuna barges into Hime's workspace, only to be treated as though she's a ghost. Hime doesn't even glance up, grinding away at her manuscript with the intensity of a Wuhan lab scientist testing their 12th mutation of the day. Harumi, observing the scene with mild confusion, finally asks Suzuna why she even bothers showing up. Suzuna explains that her mission is to push Natsuno into going public with her identity. She wants interviews, TV spots, and the kind of flashy author life that would pressure Hime into finishing the long-delayed final volume of the Deadly Sin series. Before Harumi can respond, Suzuna whips out a pile of extravagant costumes like some unhinged cosplay drag queen. Using her creepy editor reflexes, she manages to dress Hime in outfit after outfit without her noticing, turning the moment into a deranged fashion slideshow. It isn't until Suzuna tries to slide her into a swimsuit that Hime snaps out of it and delivers a brutal, well-deserved punishment. Suzuna collapses in embarrassment while Hime calmly returns to writing like nothing happened. Refusing to give up, Suzuna unveils her next tactic: alcohol. She claims that getting Hime drunk might crack open her true personality, revealing whether she turns into an angelic sweetheart or a demon queen. Harumi immediately objects, insisting Hime is too sharp to fall for it. But Suzuna, using sleight of hand that defies physics, manages to slip wine into Natsuno's cup without anyone noticing. The two of them watch her closely like scientists observing a high-risk experiment as Hime takes a sip. The effect is immediate. She rises from her chair and walks toward Harumi, causing him to panic instinctively. But instead of unleashing fury, she suddenly becomes soft, kind, and almost gentle. Hime becomes too soft for Suzuna, liking that Suzuna then offers her more wine. Hime agrees after drinking more alcohol. Hime becomes even sweeter to an unnerving degree. Then, without warning, Hime turns to Suzuna and confesses her love like an unstable ex, making Suzuna turn into a zombie in seconda and collapses on the spot. Even when Harumi insults her flat chest, instead of attacking him with her Seiyuu like she always does, Hime cuddles him gently and Harumi immediately realizes one nut in her brain must have been unscrewed. But it gets worse as Jaime's delusion switch flips to maximum power. She instantly imagines an entire future with him. The wedding, the honeymoon, the penetration ceremony, and even arguing over paint colors for their imaginary kids' room. Harumi is horrified and completely powerless. but Hime drags him toward the bedroom with very obvious intentions. Harumi, realizing he has entered the final boss stage, braces for doom as she pins him down. But at the last second, Natsuno's stomach revolts. She pukes all over Harumi in one violent burst, snapping her out of her delusion and saving him from certain trauma. Sometime later, after Jaime finally snaps back to her usual self, she immediately starts scolding Harumi for smelling worse than a pig dump. But Harumi fires back, reminding her that she is the one who turned him into a biological waste bin in the first place. Hime doesn't care. She orders him out of the apartment for an entire month so she can recover her dignity, forcing him to retreat in defeat. The strange part is, Harumi actually finds himself missing the soft, affectionate version of her from earlier, though he'd never admit that out loud unless he wanted to die. Then, out of nowhere, Hime returns with a shockingly gentle offer. She'll give him a bath, shocking Harumi. Finally, the moment Harumi has been dying for arrives. Jaime hands him a work-in-progress copy of the final Deadly Sins volume, the book he's been spiritually begging for since forever. When Hime asks for his genuine thoughts, Harumi complains about the bloated summary, the overly detailed setup, and the fact that it feels like she's explaining things with a dictionary glued to her hand. The critique, though mild, makes Jaime's eye twitch, and seconds later, the scissors come out. She lunges, chasing him through the room while Harumi sprints for his life, terrified for his tiny nuts all over again. If you watch this anime recap until the end, comment melons and dog. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. As always, thanks for watching.